Welcome, Erica. Thank you so much for joining us on the Project Seed Money interview series, where we are asking industry professionals questions as if we were coming to you as the client to help demystify the publishing process, because we really want women to be able to find people who are like-minded and share their values of being a published author without being like scared of what is going to happen. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me to chat.
Of course. Let's just jump right in. And if I was coming to you as an author, what should I expect from the process of working with you? I know there's going to be some timeline requirements when it comes to actually booking you, and then timeline requirements when it actually comes to the editing process. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. And of course, every editor has a little bit of variation in this. So I'll speak to my process, but I'm sure it's going to be pretty similar in terms of expectation. So, first thing that usually happens is you go to an editor's website, my website. You'll fill out a contact form that will allow me to better understand the parameters of the project, the scope, what you're looking for, and the sorts of things you'll be asked will be like total word count, projected timeline, when you hope to publish. And all of that is just so that I can get a better sense of whether I would be a good fit to help with your project. And also, I will ask for a sample of the manuscript, usually from the middle, because it's very normal and usual for the first chunk of chapters to be very, very well done. And I just like a representative sample to see what the writing is like, what to expect. And then I also do a sample edit on that. So you'll send in the contact form with the sample of a Word document of your manuscript. And then I'll do the sample edit. I'll send you back a proposal that basically outlines what I think should happen or what could happen, some options for working together. And sometimes it really depends on the situation, but sometimes I'll do a discovery call first, like if that makes sense, or I'll offer an optional discovery call after I do the sample edit and proposal. So those are the sorts of things like the initial onboarding to make sure that both author and editor have a good fit, good idea of what it would be like to work together. And the good thing with a sample edit is that you get to see exactly what it would be like to have your work edited. So you get to see the level of edit, you get to see the types of comments, what the communication style is, how it feels to actually have your work edited by this person. All of that is really important because you want to know what you're going to get, in the end, because it is an investment, of course. After you see the sample and after we chat, if we both think it's a good fit and we want to move forward. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, of course, like usually the timeline of this will be like several months in advance. Like you're booking editors several months in advance often. So don't necessarily expect to have the work start like tomorrow. Anyways, I'll send a contract. A deposit usually is how you book the time. How you book an editor's time in advance is you send a deposit usually. And then there'll be different ways of doing payment plans potentially, but usually expect like half up front, half at the end, or a deposit and then some amount of payment plan. You can ask all those questions of your editor, but that's generally it. And then when the time comes to send your manuscript, you send it, then you rest and relax. Your editor will do the behind the scenes magic, and the rest will be delivered back to you, and hopefully you'll be really happy with it. So that's the general onboarding process. I hope that gives a little bit of an idea of what to expect.
Absolutely. That was the perfect timeline. And it also kind of clued into some of my next questions that I wanted to know. What are some of the questions that people should reach out and ask you? And I think you kind of answered a couple of those. Like, first of all, several months in advance, because you're not going to get the work right after you get the proposal. It's going to be now a place on the calendar. And then on every manuscript is going to be different because the word count is different. But if we're talking about maybe an average size manuscript, is there kind of like an average timeline that it takes for the first pass of edits? Like that time that they're kind of resting, is that like, should they be planning 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something along those lines?
Sure, I can speak to the timeline aspect of it. So, yes, it depends on the type of editing. And that's one thing actually I forgot to mention in the other question is you really want to make sure that you're getting the right service. So there are different types of editing. There's the big picture developmental editing. Then there's the copy editing and line editing, which is at the sentence level, and that's more refinement and polishing and consistency. And then proofreading is right at the tail end of a project, kind of like the quality assurance. So all of those types of editing take different amounts of time to do. So that speaks to how long you should expect. For example, let's just say an average nonfiction book of 50,000 words. And I'll speak to copy editing because that's what I have most experience with. Copy editing and line editing, you're looking at 2 to 4 weeks potentially for that. And I'm giving a little bit of a buffer because, things happen. But 2 to 4 weeks for longer, and I work on fiction as well. So the longer fantasy manuscripts that are like 100K, 120K, I like to give myself like 4 to 8 weeks. It's going to be for copy editing of an average length, it'll be weeks to a month.
Okay.
And anything really long, expect months. And for developmental, it's similar, but I'd say just expect it's going to take longer than you expect because editors are combing through every word, looking at things at a very detailed level. Proofreading, on the other hand, which comes at the end, can be a lot quicker. So for 50K words, it could be, depending on what the topic is and what we're talking about, it could be like a couple of weeks, you know? 1 to 3 weeks. So that's the general timeline. We're not talking like 6 months or anything, but on the developmental side, that's when you have to ask a developmental editor, like, how many rounds is this? Is it coming back to me and then going back to you? Like, you really want to get the scope of work down with the editor so you know exactly how to budget your time and what to expect. But for copy editing and line editing, typically the way I do it anyways is I'll do my whole thing, send it back to the author for them to review. They see all my track changes, they accept or reject, they go through and look at everything. Then they send it back to me with any additional things they've done tracked, and I will do what I call a cleanup pass. So I'll go through and check it all, edit those extra things, and then accept everything and give it back. And that manuscript will be ready for design or whatever the next step. So that's the question. Always ask, how many rounds is this? Will you look at it again? Like, because it's not standard. You have to really get those answers from whoever you're going to work with.
During that first draft and that second draft, or that first pass and second pass, do you tell your clients like a specific time that they have to return that to you? Because I'm guessing you're working in a pretty tight timeline with yourself booking clients. So do
Yeah.
they have a certain amount that they have to bring it back to you in?
Yeah, I generally like to see it back quite quickly, like within 1 to 3 weeks. And then of course, it's overlapping with other projects I might have started, but the cleanup pass is a lot faster. And it's just looking at the minor additions. But yeah, you're looking at a pretty quick turnaround because editors book up in advance and just need to know how much time to budget in a month.
So do you take about a manuscript a month, or do you take a few manuscripts at a time? What does your process look like?
My process is that my brain likes to work on one thing at a time. So depending on what it is and how fast I can do it, and of course, I don't like to rush anything. So one thing at a time, usually if it's very long, it'll be one thing a month. But if it's a more average length, it might be two a month. And then also it depends. I can do copy editing and proofreading different projects kind of at the same time, like one in the morning and then a couple hours in the afternoon, but only if it's a very different type. Like proofreading is different. I can't do two copy edits at the same time. Some editors can, like, don't get me wrong. This is just me. Some editors like the variety and they do a third of this and then they get caught up on this. I just like doing things one at a time and sequentially. So I'd say the answer is 1 to 2, maybe 3 if they're short things. And then short stories and novellas can kind of go peppered in there wherever they can fit if I have any demand for that.
That's perfect and so interesting because you think about when we have these type of client relationships, we don't really, as a consumer, as somebody who's coming to you, I don't really think about the fact that I'm going to be maybe one of 15 to 20 total for your whole year. So as an author, I think it's really important to be respectful of these like industry professional time because you're taking up a chunk a month or more plus those revisions that coming back. So it really, in my opinion, from what we've talked about so far, it's so important to build that relationship. Like make sure you're
Mhm.
connecting with the person, make sure you like the communication style. And I
Yes,
really love that you offer the sample edits because especially for things that where it's like your voice, you're writing yourself. If someone changes that, you're gonna want to know before they dig into your whole manuscript if it doesn't match your tone and your voice.
exactly. And I always encourage people to listen to their gut, and it's fine. It's fine to get the sample edit, the proposal, and then be like, you know what? This is good, but I'm not really connecting here. There's something, I don't know. Like, I just don't like it or something. You're allowed to walk away and go and talk to other people. So always do that. If you really like the person, you like what they've done, then by all means, yes, ask any more questions you need. Like editors will answer all the questions and like to make sure that relationship fit is solid from the very beginning because it is a lot of time on both sides.
Yes, and for both of you, it's important that it clicks. So that actually leads me perfectly into my next question. What are some questions that authors should make sure they're asking the editors before they go ahead and decide to sign that contract? Like, are there a couple things that are just you must know the answer to this before you move forward?
Yeah, on top of asking like what services do you offer and making sure that that's aligned with what you actually need. On top of that basic thing, also ask like what are their genre specialties? Do they have experience editing the type of book that you have written? You know, like if it's nonfiction, like what kinds of nonfiction books have they edited? If it's fantasy, do they have a specialty in fantasy, or at least have they done copy editing of fantasy? So that's important. Also, if you're looking for a copy edit, always if it's not obvious on the website, always ask if they provide a style sheet because that's something I've seen a lot of, that a lot of editors or copy editors don't necessarily deliver a style sheet along with the edited work, which I think is an oversight because consistency is like the main thing we're looking for as copy editors. And a style sheet is like a second brain of sorts. It shows all of the style decisions that go into making sure everything is consistent in the manuscript. So if you don't have that and then you work with a proofreader after, the proofreader then doesn't have the style sheet to know what decisions have been made. It's really important to have that style sheet for copy editing. The other thing I would say is, yeah, ask about the deliverables. Like, will there be an editorial report that goes along with this? Will there be any additional things that you might not know about? Just ask those questions. Oh, and also, if it's also not obvious on the website, ask for a portfolio, ask for testimonials, do your due diligence, and don't hesitate to find these things out. If you have any reservations, just ask the questions.
And that'll show you right away, like if they're not answering questions, if the communication style doesn't
Yep,
right for you, if you're asking all these things and they're telling you, I don't want to answer that, you know, you're not going to get the feedback you're looking for. So that could be
exactly.
it right out the gate.
Yeah, well, and asking questions is a great way to see how people answer them.
I love that you offer, in addition, if it makes sense, a call because then you can kind of hear the person, talk to the person, make sure they
Yeah.
feel and that they are.
And like seeing people face to face, even if it's over Zoom, is so helpful to make you see that they're real, that that's a real human. This is the person who's going to be reading your book. They're not scary. They're not coming in here and like slashing your story to bits. Like they're going to be your cheerleader. They're going to be a fan. And I always find it helpful to have a call if the person is open to it and wants to. And we can go over the details again and make sure that everything is exactly the way it needs to be.
Yes, I absolutely love that. And I think that should be industry standard, but I know certainly that it is not. So if someone is going into this, they're an author and they're asking these questions, what are some of the things that the responses would be red flags? We kind of talked a little bit about like, oh, they don't want to answer the questions, like red flag. Are there any other red flags in the industry, like, or things that just kind of like pet peeves of other editors? We kind of touched on the style sheet. That's really incredible. And I didn't realize how valuable it would be all the way down the line. So that's something that's really amazing. What other types of red flags have you seen in your industry?
The first one that comes to mind is cost. If the cost is too good to be true and very, very low comparatively, it could be a red flag and it could not be. Sometimes I totally acknowledge there's a range. There's a range of prices, but if it's so low that you're like, really? You're going to copy edit my book for $100? Just know that copy editing takes a long time and someone is looking up so much stuff to make sure that the details are correct, that it's according to the Chicago Manual of Style, if that's the style guide you're using, which usually it is in fiction, especially. So, cost, if it's too low, you kind of want to ask, like, what is involved? Like, what else will you be doing? The other thing is contracts. If they don't deliver a contract or don't want to, or there's hesitation and they just don't want to do it, that's a red flag because a contract, it protects both parties and it'll tell you, what happens if I get sick and I have to bump my timeline? What happens? Like, these are the what ifs, and the contract covers how and what the editor will do, what the author should know will happen in any of these contingency situations. Another red flag might be rushing. Like, you want to ask questions or you want to sample edit and they're rushing you somehow, or they're saying, oh, well, I'll give you a deal if you answer me. If you feel a rush of any kind, I feel that could be a red flag. Like, why are they rushing me? It should definitely be whenever you're ready, here's what I can offer you, here's my availability. And if the author doesn't answer fast enough, then when they do get back to the editor and the editor has a different availability, that's just how it is. But if the author feels rushed in any way to put down a huge chunk of money fast, that could be a red flag. And also promising to edit way too quickly. Like, if it's a turnaround that's like, I can edit your book in 3 days, and your book isn't very short, like, that is a red flag. Like, it takes weeks to a month. Why and how are you condensing that timeline? And what corners are you cutting? What software are you using? Are you even reading this? Are you just putting it through Pro Writing Aid or some other software? Like, so that's a red flag if it's too fast, way, way, way too cheap, and no contracts and rush. And just not feeling good.
That's probably the biggest one. Like, make sure you're, like you said before, going with your gut. Is it industry standard to do the 50% upfront and then the 50% at the end? Or would anybody ever ask for everything all up front?
Yes, that's another one. It is standard to do staggered, like some amount up front and then at the end, and then maybe some in the middle, like depending on how big a project it is. Usually, if it's a big project and they're asking for 100% right now, that's a red flag for sure. But if you have a short thing, like if you have a short story or a very short something that will take hours somehow, yeah, that might be reasonable to be like, okay, pay now and I'll deliver this in 2 days or one day. But for actual novels or actual book length manuscripts, I would say no. Like, it is much more standard to do half now, half later, or 20% now, 40% when you start, and then 40% at the end. So yeah, thank you for reminding me of that one.
Yes, because you never really know with that. Like, is it
Yeah.
going to be like, oh, I'm giving my person all this money and they're gonna just bail on me, which I've heard just in the last 3 weeks, I've heard at least 4 horror stories that were
Really?
I paid for the editor, they didn't return anything or didn't give me the money back,
Wow.
didn't give me the manuscript at least. And it's so sad. It's so sad.
Yeah, it's awful. No, I personally do typically 20% deposit, 40% right before I'm about to start, and then at the end, the rest as I'm delivering. So
Yeah.
that's how I've typically done it. Sometimes 50 and 50, but I've never asked for everything up front. It just doesn't feel correct at all.
Yeah. And because the process is a lengthy process. So I feel like
Mhm.
no sense to kind of break it up. And it does help the author too, because you don't have to have the whole nut right away to book your time slot. And
Yeah.
then how far in advance are you finding people booking your calendar? Is it like 3 months, 4 months, 5 months? I mean, it's
Um,
varied, I'm guessing.
yeah, I'd say it's more typical like a couple of months. I don't really like to book farther than a couple of months simply for my preferences because I'm like, well, I want to be able to know, like, will I want to be doing this right then? So, like, the quarter, like the 3 month or 4 month is my limit. So, but some editors are booked really far out. And so that can happen. But for me, it's like 1 to 3 months in advance is good. But sometimes, though, projects can shift. Like, I just had a client who asked, can I start 3 weeks later because of life stuff happening? And then so I contacted another client up the stream, and so we reorganized a little bit. So that can happen too. And that's why I don't like for everything to be so, get like the buffer room a little bit. And that way it's just easier to reorganize if need be. It's not ideal, but these things happen, right?
Yeah, and writing a manuscript, anything can happen. Like, I would imagine that you would want people who are at least like in the beta reading or at least almost done with their manuscript because I can
Mhm.
imagine for myself, even as a writer, I put my project down all the time and leave it for months at a time. So if
Mhm.
I'm looking an editor already, should they be at a certain progress point?
Certainly, if we're talking copy editing and line editing, sentence level, yeah, you want your manuscript to be well self-revised, beta read. Possibly you have worked with a developmental editor if need be, if you wanted that big picture structural feedback, all of that. And you've taken your manuscript as far as you can, and then now you're ready for the professional with like the detail focus to come in and make sure everything's consistent, polished, refined, as good as it can get for the next stage, which is design and then proofreading usually. So yeah, you want to have done quite a bit of work. It's a different answer for developmental editors, right? Like
Right.
in
Right.
that case, it's like maybe you have a manuscript evaluation and then you do some revisions. And then I think beta readers would come after developmental usually. Yeah, there's a slightly different answer for the big picture folks. But yeah, for people like me, it's certainly not your first draft. It's not like, "Oh, I finished my first draft, send" no, 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 like, that's too early, it's not ready yet.
And I think the price will end up being so much more because you're dealing with like very raw, very rough. So like the better
Yeah,
edited you are,
yes,
self edited you are, the better that price is going to be because it's not going to be as much work and time on your part.
exactly.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good. Okay, so I just want to ask one more question. If you could encourage our audience, they're like, they're sitting on the fence, they're scared. Maybe they're scared about the editing process, and that's what's keeping them from writing. Is there anything that you can say to them about this whole journey that would kind of give them a little bit of encouragement to just move forward on your path? It's not so scary. Look, Eric is so kind. You're going to be great.
Yeah, I would just encourage anyone writing a book or wanting to write a book that you should definitely do it if it's in your heart to do it, if you have that passion and you wanna share your story, like, the world does need your stories, needs your words. Don't be scared of feedback and editors. You can find an editor who is on your team, who is kind, who meshes with what you need. You can find them, and then they will help you. A lot of the stereotype of the editor is like, "Ooh, I have my red pen and I'm going to, like, make you feel terrible when you get" No, no, like, that should never be the feeling that anyone gets. Just realize that, yes, when you get your manuscript back from an editor, you will see red line and changes and stuff, but it's all in the service of refining your book, but with your vision in mind, your voice, your vision. The editor is there to support you and to make your manuscript the best version of itself that it can be, not to impose their preferences and what they would have done. They can go and write their own book if that's their thing. So an editor is there to support you and to help you move along the self-publishing or traditional publishing path, whichever. We didn't even talk about that, the two kind of streams of things, but like there are editors around to help you accomplish your goals. You just have to look for them, make sure you ask your questions, and make sure there's a good fit. But I promise you, there are people out there who want to help you and who can help you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your time and your expertise in this interview. I'm so grateful for you. If you could please tell our audience where they can find you, website and social media, any other contact information.
You can find me on Instagram at erica.steeves.edits. So I hang out there. My website is my name, ericasteeves.com. And you can find all sorts of information about what I do, how I can help you make your book a reality. My website has everything. Instagram is my social media of choice. I'm on LinkedIn. If you just search my name, I'm sure you'll find me. Yeah, and that's about it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for being with us today. And I just hope everyone really enjoys this interview. I think that they will hopefully feel more confident about the editing
I
process.
hope
That's
so.
my real goal. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on another episode for Project Seed Money. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And I will see you with another interview next week. Bye.